Good evening and happy Friday to you all. I hope that you all had a really, really good day despite the weather. It wasn't too bad on this end of things. This evening I thought I'd talk about what Calaveras are as well as what literary Calaveras are. And so we'll get into that right now. Calaveras is Spanish for skull, which is the representation of the human skull. The term is most often applied to decorative or edible skulls made usually by hand from either sugar or clay, which are used obviously in Day of the Dead, which is most common with what people associate them for. Calaveras can also refer to an artistic representation of skulls, such as lithographs of José Guadalupe Posada. The most widely known calaveras are created with cane sugar and are decorated with items such as colorful foil, icing, beads, and feathers. Traditional methods for producing calaveras have been used since the 17th century. Skulls are created from either children or as offerings to be placed on the altar, known as the ofrendia, for Day of the Dead. Which, if you didn't, I talked about this a couple evenings ago, but it's the altar that's set up to honor deceased loved ones and ancestors. So that's what the ofrendia is. So they get set on those. The tradition of sugar skulls is for families to decorate their loved ones' ofrendia with large and small handmade sugar skulls. Small sugar skulls represent the children who have died, which is celebrated on November 1st, because the day 1st is por los niños. Let's see. While the larger skulls represent the adults, with the celebration taking place the following day on November 2nd. It is believed that the departed return home to enjoy the offerings at the altar, which is why they get set up. Which is why they set up the ofrendia. In pre-Columbian times, the images of skulls and skeletons were shown often in paintings, pottery, etc., representing rebirth into the next stage of life. During the 20th century, a political caricaturist named José Guadalupe Posada became famous for making calaveras as vain skeletons dressed in clothing of the wealthy, the most famous of which was Katrina, wearing a feathery hat and a long dress. Katrina is considered to be the personification of Day of the Dead. These skeletons are created from many materials such as wood, sugar paste, varieties, types of nuts, chocolates, etc. When used as offerings, the name of the deceased is written across the forehead of the skull in colorful foil. If you've never seen Katrina, she's usually probably the most famous one, as it was said. She's got like the big freaking hat on with the feathers, and it's really ornate, and she's got this really fancy, almost kind of like Victorian dress on. It's very indicative to what you see a lot of in a lot of pictures. And when they make the sugar skulls, as far as the process goes, because it's so huge, it takes them like 6 months to build up a stockpile just for the event. And some are made to be edible, and a lot of them are made to not be edible. So they do either or, and they're made also with chocolate and as well as sugar at times, depending on the material, and clay too. Literary calaveras are exactly that. Poetry written for the Day of the Dead are also known as literary calaveras, and are intended to be humorously criticize the living while reminding them of their mortality. Literary Calaveras appeared during the second half of the 19th century, when drawings critical of important politicians began to be published in the press. Living personalities were depicted as skeletons exhibiting recognizable traits, mocking them easily marking them easily. Additionally, drawings of the dead personalities often contain text elements providing details of deaths in various individuals. The rules of Calavera writing are relatively flexible. The creation is to be composed of verses, preferably incorporations of consonantus and strophes of 4 lines, which I probably just murdered all 3 of those words. Most calaveras are only made of 1 or 2 of the strophes, although longer calaveras are also in existence. In the calaveras, the chosen subject, who is usually the politician of a famous figure or simply a friend or a relative, is presented as dead or close to dying and meeting with la muerte, which is death. The calavera is a humoristic take on the traditional epithet, meaning to highlight the personal characteristics of the subject. One example of a written literary calavera is as follows. Teacher Martha was smoking a cigarette. Death comes along and told her, "I will accompany you, for I can no longer smoke, and if you keep up like this, the same thing will happen to you." It's a way of mocking death. And another thing too, when Jose did his depictions too of what he did in his literaries, it was also reminding the wealthy that they don't escape death, because death is for everyone. I hope that you got a little bit more deeper insight as to why now where there are sugar skulls placed on the altar and what their relevance is in being on the ofrenda. It goes back a long way into pre-context, because as I was talking about with the Aztecs, a lot of things in their culture had skulls and things like that, because death was very prevalent and prominent for them, as we talked about last night about the mass sacrifices that they did to appease their deities, so that their status quo of life would stay the same. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for tonight. If you're interested, I looked up a lot of that on Wikipedia. There were a couple of other sites that were pretty much there, but I've always thought it was just a really cool, the literary ones are just really neat, because death is lighthearted and to them, and it's a celebration and continuation into another journey. It's not, as I've said before, this bad thing that happens. Well, because that's all relative to how you really look at things, but that's neither here nor there. Yep, death is something to be honored. Anyhow, I hope that you all had a beautiful day again, and thanks for hanging out with me and tuning in for this. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I'm pretty much all the way through Aztec stuff, but I'm sure I'll come up with something else to share with you as far as maybe another culture and how they go about honoring their dead, because there are other cultures and society who honor their dead, and they do have days set aside for them. The Chinese do, the Japanese do, there's a number that do that, so perhaps I'll look a little bit more into that and I will share those with you. I talked to a friend of mine today, and I had asked him if he would care to share his take on the way he works with his ancestors. So I'm sure I will be adding that here as well, because what he does, very much for what he does for divination, involves his relationship with that. So I am looking forward to having him do a live with me on his take on it all. So we'll post that probably in like a week or so. We can work it out. But I hope they have a beautiful night, a beautiful day tomorrow. Much love to you all. Aho, and good night.